And Congressman Hall, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for having me on.
Well, let's get started with a little politics and then move a little bit into policy, if you wouldn't mind. There's an interesting report out today coming out of D.C. that House Democrats and Democratic insiders are increasingly worried that they really could lose control of the House. And you're seeing, amazingly, a couple of Democratic candidates running ads against the leadership. What's your thought about that?
Well, I'm not. But you know, in our democracy, we have a choice, especially in the House, every 2 years. And if the voters decide they want to give the keys back to the guys that drove us into the ditch with 8 years of no regulation and crazy fiscal policies and you know, the people who basically caused or allowed our financial and economic crisis to happen, if they want to give control back to them, I think it's a mistake. And that'll certainly be the argument that I make, but I hope they don't choose that.
Because you have been criticized to some degree by Republicans for voting along with Nancy Pelosi, and particularly for your health care vote, for example, and subsequently for the most recent vote was this $26 billion bill that gave Medicaid relief to the states, that enabled states to hire back teachers, for example, that Democrats cast as a jobs preservation bill and Republicans cast as too much spending. So let's first start with...
you know,
go ahead.
First of all, 16 Republican governors were among the 42 governors who wrote to us asking us to pass that bill. And the reason is because their states are in financial crisis, like New York State is, and California is, and other, especially the big states. So it's a nonpartisan thing as far as the governors are concerned. This wasn't just an education bill, and it wasn't just a jobs bill. It's a bill about the future of this generation of kids who are in school right now. And if you have anybody K through 12, a child who's in school during a time when our economy is suffering, if they are allowed to have a substandard education with larger class sizes, advanced placement courses cut, field trips cut, technology cut, music and art cut, they will carry that deficit in their education through their entire lifetime, and it'll mean lower lifetime earning capacity for them, and also less competitiveness for us as a country with the emerging economies of China, India, or other countries around the world. So this is really something that should be of concern to all of us, and I'm glad that the governors had the foresight to ask for it. By the way, it keeps not only your teachers, police, and firemen on the jobs here in New York State, but also keeps your state and local taxes down.
But in terms of your health care bill vote, you still feel that that was the appropriate vote to make, the yes vote that you cast on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, for the 5-year-old that I met here in Orange County who has spina bifida, pre-existing condition, obviously, because he was born with it, and had 3 operations by the age of 5, had exhausted his lifetime cap under his father's insurance, there will be no more lifetime cap. For people like my brother, who had a stroke 15 years ago and is totally recovered from it, speaks normally, drives a car, rides a mountain bike, but can't get health insurance because he has a pre-existing condition, that will no longer be allowed. For seniors who have the donut hole being closed so that over the course of the program they won't have to pay the highest prices for their prescription drugs. And by the way, it's never been covered in the press, but we voted, and I voted, to have our congressional health care policy go away by 2014 when the exchange is rolled out. And we, members of the House and the Senate, are the only Americans who will be required to buy our insurance through this new program that the law created. And the reason I did that, and I said when I was campaigning that I wanted to vote for a program that my family and I would have to buy health care from. And the reason is to show my constituents that it's real and that they can count on it to take care of themselves and their families.
Now, you know, your district actually used to be represented by a Republican, Sue Kelly, who you ousted, not in 08 and 06.
Yep, sure.
Which indicates that it's pretty much of a swing district. It's pretty tightly divided there.
It was Republican for a long time.
Right, but now closer, but now in the Democratic line. But when people say to you, when Republicans say you're too liberal, you vote too much along with the House leadership, what is your response to that?
Well, first of all, when the House leadership puts a bill up to regulate Wall Street, and I think they're right because Wall Street obviously won't regulate itself, I voted for it because I thought it was the right policy. When BP is obviously unable to oversee or regulate themselves, I vote for stronger federal regulations on oil companies and other energy companies. When the healthcare industry obviously is taking advantage of people and small businesses by driving up insurance rates at premium increases of 35%, 39.5%. Some businesses here in my district have told me for a one-year increase. They obviously need more regulation to keep those increases down, and so I happily defend my vote, which happened to be with the leadership, to try to regulate them. By the way, my opponents all opposed those votes and said they would vote to repeal them. So it's a question of, do you stand with big business or do you stand with American families?
Well, in terms of Wall Street, though, I mean, you are seeing people in New York, particularly the governor of New York and also the mayor of New York City, defending Wall Street and saying, hey, this is the economic engine of this state, and what you're doing with your regulation, you ought to be awfully careful because you're killing the goose that laid the golden egg in New York.
I don't think that's the truth, and in fact, the bonuses that you're seeing on Wall Street now show that it's not the case. These banks and investment houses are making profits again at the same level or higher than they were before we passed this regulation. The truth is, I know many people, including supporters of mine and friends who work on Wall Street, who say it's a few people who have given the whole industry a bad name. There are people who work in banks and investment houses and doing financial consulting who are scrupulous and have a good conscience and are trying to prevent an honest and fair product to their consumers. But you shouldn't be able to have a guy, for instance, construct a fund that is designed to fail, sell it to people who bought it in good faith, describing it as a good product, and then bet against it and make $1 billion and walk away with $1 billion while thousands of people go broke because of his efforts. That kind of thing deserves to be criminalized, in my opinion. So I'm not saying all Wall Streeters are bad. I don't believe that. But I do think it's just like meat inspection or lead in toys or cars that roll over. When an industry won't regulate itself sufficiently for the public safety or interest, then I think government needs to act.
See, now the ideology that you're espousing is fairly liberal, what you're describing here, and so I was surprised to see, actually, when you came out and said that you thought that the Islamic Center and mosque that's been proposed by Ground Zero would be better off somewhere else.
No, I didn't say that, Liz. I said that they have the right to build it where it is, and that freedom of religion is an important part of our country's heritage, but that they would be wise to consider building it somewhere else in the interest of sensitivity to the victims, the survivors of the victims, and to to those people who are still grieving every September 11th. I mean, this is not a matter, in my opinion, of what they legally can do. Right. It's a matter of what they should consider doing in the interest of peace and accommodation.
But did you feel pressured to come out in some way on this particular issue? Because I know the Republicans have been pressuring people all along the spectrum. In addition, until the president weighed in.
We lost hundreds of firefighters alone in my district on 9/11. I have families who I still see on the anniversary every year, and I have also been to a number of funerals and followed soldiers who are fighting in Afghanistan today, or who have been back and forth, as my work on the Veterans Affairs Committee has given me a pretty good window into the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. And I think it's important for us to differentiate between Wahhabi radical Islam and traditional, more peaceful strain, which used to be the mainstream of Islam. And I have Islamic supporters here in the district. There are quite a few Muslims who live here, including some who have supported my campaigns. But this is a case where those parties who are directly involved in New York City in this issue, I think, should listen to each other and try to come to an accommodation.
And this is another one of those cases, though, of sort of like this outside New York City issue becoming an issue all over in New York State, even though it's so hyper-specific to New York, and Manhattan, rather. And the other one, of course, is Charlie Rangel. Now, you've given back, I think it's $21,000 that was connected to Rangel. You've actually not given it back. Donated it to charity. Is that correct?
That's correct. As soon as the charges were made public, we donated that money to firefighters associations, to the Veterans Food Bank at Montrose VA Hospital, to the battered women's shelter in Putnam County, to Autism Speaks in Westchester, to a bunch of different worthy charities, trying to turn a negative into a positive and helping some nonprofits who are having a hard time raising money in this recession.
But do you still feel that in terms of a decision of whether he should resign or not seek re-election, that's a personal decision and that you do not want to weigh in on that decision for him?
Well, Liz, you have right of due process, and I have right of due process. All of us in America do, and so does Charlie Rangel. If he wants to surrender that and waive it and resign of his own decision, that's his decision. I wouldn't want somebody telling me to surrender my right of due process, and I don't think any of us should have to face that.
Heading into this election, there was a little bit of concern regarding your fundraising. I'm just looking at the numbers. You last had $564,000 on hand. Your main Republican opponent, who actually, it should be said, has a primary on her hands, has $774,000, $500,000 of which she loaned to her own campaign. So she's wealthy.
Right. So I actually raised more money than she did, but she donated herself $500,000 so far. Look, I'm not a professional fundraiser, and I'm also trying to do the job for the 680,000 New Yorkers who I represent, more people than the state of Alaska has, by the way. And so it's a full-time job being a congressman, in addition to which I'm trying to run a campaign. We're working on the fundraising, and I'm confident that we'll have enough to get our message out. But honestly, the campaign finance reform that keeps being struck down by this 5-4 conservative majority on the Supreme Court is really important, and this needs to change. There's another area where my opponents disagree with me. The Citizens United Supreme Court decision that allowed corporations to have more rights, not just equal rights to a person, but more rights, because you or I have a maximum of $4,800 to make a contribution to a candidate, whereas a corporation can spend millions. And it can be a foreign-owned corporation. Now, I voted for the Disclose Act, which would try to at least force them to use their real name and put the CEO up on the screen saying, my name is so-and-so from Exxon and I approve this message, the same way I have to do as a candidate. But my opponents are for letting it be completely shielded and non-transparent to the voter. I think that's a mistake, and I'm afraid the direction we're going, only millionaires will be able to run for office, or people who have the support of giant corporations.
Congressman, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I hope we could have you back after the primary and talk to you again before the general election.
I'd love to.
Because, of course, there are many other topics that we weren't able to hit on. I want to thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me on.